Good evening, everyone. I'm Elizabeth George, Chief Membership Officer with the American Guild of Organists, and I am delighted to have with me tonight some real subject knowledge experts who are going to talk about the key things that you need to know when you serve as chapter treasurer. And I'm so delighted that our presenters tonight are all members of our newly created chapter specialist support teams. So you're going to be hearing from our finance specialist support people tonight, and that includes Jeff Verkeilen, who has served in so many officer positions within his chapter and currently sits on the AGO's finance committee, and Mark Anderson, who is Dean of the Central North Carolina chapter, Joe Galima, who is treasurer of the Colorado Springs chapter, and Justin Smith, who is the treasurer of the Wilmington, North Carolina chapter. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. You are muted, but we do want to hear from you. So please post your questions in the Q&A box down at the very bottom of your screen. After we go through this presentation, which is really not going to take that long, then we can delve into some questions. And if there are additional ones when we go past over the 30-minute mark, email them to me. This is being recorded. We will answer any additional ones. We're going to provide a handout of spreadsheets for you. And so you feel comfortable with so you have the right tools. So without further ado, I am going to screen share my PowerPoint. Here we go, about the key responsibilities of serving as chapter treasurer. And I just want to go through a couple of important things that I think you'll find interesting. And I want to thank you, first of all, for responding to the survey that we sent to you, because it really helped us in forming how we wanted to present this webinar tonight. So, do you submit an annual financial report to headquarters? 19.8% of you said yes. 80.2% of you said no. Do you submit a quarterly P&L income statement to your board? 40.6% of you said no. 59.4% of you said yes. Does your chapter have a budget? 54.5% of you said yes, and 45.5% of you said no. Have you served as a treasurer longer than 2 consecutive 3-year terms? 43.6% of you said yes. 56.4% of you said no. Are your chapter funds bearing in interest accounts? 37.6% of you said no. 62.4% of you said yes. And as we go down, this is an interesting slide. What percentage of your annual budget have you allocated to young organist endeavors? And the answers were all across the board here. And Mark Anderson, in just a couple of minutes, is going to really explain this and go into a little bit of detail about why it's important to do this. But I mean, it varies from 5%. We never spend it. We don't have a specific amount. As the need arises, we will act on a request. One chapter allocates $1,000. One chapter says about 1%. We haven't sent a current program budget, so we're not able to provide information. So as you can see, it's really all across the board here. Do you set aside funds to assist chapter members who can't afford to pay their dues? 26.7% of you said yes. 73.3% of you said no. Have your chapter finances been audited? And we're going to talk about this in a little more detail later, within the past 3 years. 30.7% of you said yes. 69.3% of you said no. So let's start first. Mark, if you'd like to talk about allocating funds for young organist endeavors. So you just need to unmute yourself and show your video. Okay, there you go.
Good evening, everyone. This is something that is very dear to my heart. Our chapter has made wonderful endeavors in presenting young artists in concert, establishing scholarship programs, and those scholarship programs have gained us members and given many young organists the opportunity to remain members of the national chapter. Very critical.
Mark, what I found wonderful when you and I had spoken was that you really said you continue to pay these dues annually as these young organists grow, because you feel it's so important in growing our guild.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, not only do we pay dues for the next year for these young people, young organists, we also pay to send them to a POE and to get involved with other performance venues in our area.
That's wonderful. That is just amazing. And that's why you have such a strong base of young organists. So let's go to the next slide. And this is about setting aside funds to assist members who cannot afford to pay them. Joe, did you want to talk about this?
Yes, I'll just talk about it a little bit. Some chapters do set aside funds, and remember, it would probably just be the national portion of the dues that you would have to pay. You wouldn't have to pay the full amount. But in case there are any chapter members who just cannot pay dues but want to remain involved, there are some chapters that do that. Another idea I had was in some chapter operating procedures, they have an item called honorary members, where the chapter actually pays for a member, and you can set up parameters perhaps for honorary members within your chapter to pay for their dues.
Yes, we have seen that. So that's really, really wonderful. You know, we felt so proud that when we were in lockdown in COVID, we were able to create some funds that I want to say helped pay for over 250 memberships that year. And I wish we still had the funds to do that. Unfortunately, we just don't at the moment. Okay, well, let's go on and talk a little bit about, are your funds in interest-bearing accounts?
These funds, it is our fiduciary responsibility to be good stewards of this money. And one of the ways that we can immediately be a good steward is by making sure that the funds that we're not currently using are in interest-bearing accounts. One of these accounts is something like American Express high yield accounts. It's very easy to transfer money back and forth to your bank account. You don't get any penalties for taking money out, but as long as it's there, it bears great interest for our chapters. We have found that if we have money that we're setting aside for scholarships during the part of the year that we're not doing our scholarship competitions, that money sits in interest bearing, and it helps tremendously.
Great, thank you so much for that explanation. All right, so here we're going to go into some core responsibilities of serving as treasurer. And it's important to provide a P&L income statement. It would be great for every board meeting and minimally every quarter. And Jeff, did you want to talk a little bit about this? And I think, Justin, are you going to screen share? There we go. Great.
No, yeah. Good evening, everyone. It's great to be with you. We're going to be looking at an example or two, or just having some discussion about income statements. And when we say income statement, it's the same as P&L. It's the same term, or it's the same thing, two different terms. And here we're looking at a budget to actual comparison of information. we're looking at the top, you'll see revenues, and at the bottom is expenses. Okay, so we're projecting that we have, this is certainly just an example here, but you identify certain categories of expenses, newsletters, banquet fees, etc., where money is going to come into your chapter from. Okay, and you're going to report on those, and that is your actual column. Okay, those and actual at the top, the revenues at the top, expenses at the bottom. And again, various categories of how you want to track how you spend your money. Here, these are simply examples here that we have, but hopefully they would be examples that a lot of chapters would use. You know, you have banquet expenses. Most of us have banquets. Concert artist fees. We're bringing in artists for some chapter programming. We have printing expenses for various things. And then we have all of those are totaled, revenues, expenses at the bottom. Hopefully everything's black. Okay, black means that we have more revenues than expenses. What we don't like to see is red, which would be more expenses than revenues, unless if we purposely identified a purpose for what we're going to do that. Like if we had money carrying it from previous years. It's important to report this information to the chapter officers at a minimum, and if not, the entire chapter, to let them know how the finances are coming through for the year, and do this on a periodic basis. This here, for this example here, says for the year ended June 30th, and it certainly can be for an end of year, okay? But if you could certainly be also, it could be September 30th of 2022, you know, 3 months into the year, or whatever fiscal year your chapter operates on. So you just change the dates as necessary. But in this case, this example is showing what like a year end would look like.
Well, that's great. It's great to be transparent. And Justin, forgive me, but don't you do that in every newsletter that you send out? You usually give an updated report.
It's not this detailed. Well, it is detailed. It's more like a check register almost of the individual transactions, not a P&L in the sense of against a budget, but it's the same sort of idea.
Okay, great.
Every month in the newsletter, yes.
Do you want to go ahead and talk about why a chapter should have a budget?
Sure. So, you might notice that these numbers are the same from the previous sheet here. And this is basically a simple budget. And you go through your revenues, you think about all your revenues for the year, and you think about all your expenses for the year. And to answer this specific question, why do we have a budget? Well, it's very important to remember that, you know, when your committee, your program committee is trying to plan events, they're going to want to know how much they can spend on each event. And so we don't fly by the seat of our pants. It's, you know, it's important to kind of know how much we can tell them that they can spend. So a big part of the treasurer's job is to know, okay, how much are we going to be able to give for this recital or that banquet or whatever? And so the budget really allows you to do that. And it really allows you to put into place a strategic plan, if you have one, to put money values on all the different things that you're planning. So that's why it's important to me. I know many of you are in small chapters. I'm in a small chapter, and you say, well, it's hard to do a budget because you don't know how many people are going to renew or what money you're going to have coming in or going out. But I would encourage you to at least just try, even if you haven't been doing it, to try and just start and go back and just look at your checking account for the last year or two, see what you've spent, see what you've had come in, and then put that down in a spreadsheet or a Word document, however you want to do it, and just go from there and just see, okay, are we balanced or are we not? Are we going into our previous year revenue or not? So that's the main reason to have a budget, because you are wanting to be able to plan for the future for the organization, not just this year, but going forward as well. So a budget allows you to do that. And it also allows you to have something to share with national, showing what you've been doing. It's not just like your monthly TAO program reports. That's great, but this is a little bit more detailed into making sure that we are being fiduciary responsibilities as well, keeping track of those.
And it really is part of your strategic planning process. You can't plan unless you know what kind of funds you're going to be allocating, and if you're going to have enough funding to do what you want to do. So great points. Thank you so much. So I think we have come to, why it's important to produce a year-end report and send it to headquarters. And we really do want to see this. It helps give us an idea, particularly for the smaller chapters. Some of you I know are struggling. You don't have the money to bring in maybe the artists that you might like to for recital, do a workshop that you might want to. And let me just say, I'm going out on a limb here, but I've never been shy. My goal is, I think that the AGO should be giving every chapter at least one free program a year. Now, we can talk about what kind of a program in another webinar, but I do feel, particularly for those chapters that are struggling financially, I think it would help greatly. So, having said all of that, I think we're going to go back and talk about year-end report. Jeff, did you want to say anything about that?
Sure. At the end of the year, and we have an example here of a balance sheet. Balance sheet is the same thing as a statement of financial position. So these, again, interchangeable terms, but this is what the chapter has for financial resources at the end of the year. Balance sheets are always on a certain date. Whereas income statements or P&Ls are for a certain time period. Balance sheets are on a certain date. And here we are at the end of the year saying, okay, this Little Falls chapter, pseudo chapter, whatever, has $10,000, $10,365 of net worth and assets available to it. Okay, resources that are available. Okay, so information then that goes to the headquarters, which should include this, as well as a P&L or income statement.
Thank you. All righty. Well, I think we can, let me share my screen, and let's go down to, just go down here. Give me. Okay. See if I can put this in so that you're not looking at all the notes. Okay, we're going to start this from the current slide. There we go. All right, so let's talk a little bit about chapter audits and term limits for treasurers. Who wants to speak about that? Joe?
This Joe?
I think
Jeff,
Okay.
we skipped a slide.
you did. I'm so sorry. Okay. Let me go back.
I'm happy to talk about audits for chapters, which should not be a scary thing. And it should not be conducted by the treasurer, because the treasurer is the one that prepares all the report. But if your chapter is small, like my chapter is small, we can form a committee and perhaps have somebody on that committee who is a financial person of some sort or just understands finances. The basic thing you need to do for an audit is compare your bank statement with what you're putting out for your financial report. So the numbers should match. If your financial report or your income statement, whatever you're calling it, a P&L, is done quarterly, well, then you should look at your bank statement also at the end of that quarter, and the numbers should match. If they don't match, something needs to be fixed. But that does not, you don't have to spend money to do this. And I would encourage, especially smaller chapters, not to spend money to do it. If you're a larger chapter and you have the money budgeted for an audit, it can get very expensive. But even then, you may you may have your business manager at a church where somebody works that would do it just gratis or just for a token gift card or something, look at your report. You want to make sure that you're transparent. All of your finances are transparent and you're accountable for them. So that's the basic. National does not require an audit. So you don't have to turn it into national, but it's good to put it in your board meeting minutes that so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so on the audit committee reviewed the finances of the chapter and found the following, and then list what they found. And it could be they found no, what's the word I'm wanting, Jeff?
Discrepancies?
Discrepancy.
Findings,
Yeah.
audit
Right.
findings.
Right.
No surprises.
No surprises. I mean, you can go, an audit can also go into, like, if you do contracts or investments, you can look at that, but that should all be on a bank statement of some sort that you could look at. So
And you
that's
said
the audit.
something good, Joe, about having an auditing committee. If you can get a few people together, that's just fine. That's just fine. And they can be members of your chapter, or as you said, someone from your church. So I did skip ahead to the next slide, and I do apologize. And this is along the same lines, and it's really the audits and maybe setting term limits for treasurers. And I think, Jeff, were you going to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, I'll just say a few words about this. This is an audit control. When treasurers are in positions for too long of periods, it makes it more possible to not manage funds fairly, honestly. And certainly we are not wanting to point fingers at any one of our members, right? But the more that the treasurer is in place, the less oversight there is to a treasurer. The more possibility there is for the treasurer to take money for oneself out of the chapter funds. Okay, this is meant to avoid that. Okay, no treasurer should be in a role for more than 6 years. You want this turnover so that a new treasurer comes in and can see what has been done with the financial statements for the past number of years with the previous treasurer. And again, the previous treasurer can come back in again, but there's some kind of rotation, some oversight that's going on here. Again, we talked about transparency. This is very much a transparency issue. A lot of chapters have a problem finding treasurers, and I know that there are chapters that have treasurers that last for 60 or more. Well, I'm thinking about an organization I am in Green Bay that we just replaced a 60-year term treasurer. Okay, but it's not an AGO thing. So, but again, transparency and all this kind of stuff that you want to make sure that people are they're aware of what's going on and that you're being open and honest. Okay. Also, we're talking about bench strength here. Okay, so why should one person be familiar with all the financial operations of the chapter? It's better to be able to spread that information among others and that experience, and building leadership for the future as well.
Thank you so much. Okay. Come on. Okay. So before we take questions, I'm just going to put my 2 cents in. You do not need to be a CPA to be a treasurer. We've got tools and templates on the chapter leadership toolkits, and we now have these wonderful chapter specialist support teams. So contact, for example, if you have questions about budgets, contact our finance support team specialists and they'll help you. And I'm going to show you before we end where you can submit in case you're unsure about where to look on our website to do this. So we do have some questions, and I know that we are short on time. So let's go from the beginning. Karen Billings, what is the fund Mark mentioned? Is it an FDIC insured Mark, would you like to answer?
Yes, it is FDI insured. It is part of the American Express system, but you do not have to have an American Express account to do this. It is a separate thing from the credit card. It is part of the American Express banking system, and it's called American Express High Yield Interest Account.
Thank you. As a follow-up, what is a regional interest to expect on interest-bearing account? Well, I guess that's tough given the economy, but you want to continue with that, Mark, or somebody else jump in?
The American Express High Yield, I happen to know, is 3.9%.
Okay, great. David Nichols has a comment here. P&L each quarter is confusing because income and expenses aren't equally divided among the quarters. Good comment. Anybody want to comment on that, team?
Well, it's tough. I deal with this on a regular basis. There's not really any way you can get around it. I think maybe monthly, if you have time to do a P&L monthly, it's better. But of course, monthly isn't any better because you might have a big recital one month and then no programs the next month. So, you know, it really, you have to take the long view, I would say, and see what it looks like over a year or two. And then if you want to make adjustments to the budget, that would be a good place to do it after you've kind of been through a year of it. Of course, you should keep up with it during the year.
That would be helpful. Regarding funds for new young organists, the Houston chapter offers $10,000 for new young organists to attend national convention every other year. Thank you so much, Houston chapter. That is really extraordinary that you have the funding to do that. Is there a list of tasks for chapter auditors? We can probably put some recommendations together. So we will do that for you, Jeffrey. Thomas Bernard has asked, after submitting the annual report of expenses and balance sheets for over 15 years, I have never received any feedback from AGO HQ of receipt or comments. Well, shame on us, Thomas, for that. I'm going to slap my own hand, though I haven't been here for 15 years. And we should be saying thank you so very much for submitting it. And congratulations, you ended the year in the black. And isn't it wonderful what you contributed as far as programming or what you did to help young organists? So point well taken. Thank you very, very much. How often should a chapter have an audit? What did we say? At least every 3 years? Was that the consensus?
I would recommend once a year.
Once a year.
Once a year. Yeah. At the end of or after the end of a program year, or after the end of the fiscal year for the chapter. Okay.
Year to year, what should happen to the treasurer's files and how long should they be kept outside of what is reported in the minutes? I think they should be kept. I think you need to have a storage space to keep these. Many of you can set this up on a Google Drive very easily. You can certainly print hard copies of them, but I think it's important to keep them. What do you think, guys?
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I just mentioned the IRS expects 7 years. Okay.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
So 7 years would be the absolute minimum, but certainly it's easy to be able to store a lot of documentation, especially electronically now. I think people would like that. Chapters would like that for historical records.
I know my husband and I realized I was about to toss out our reports, and he said, no, it hasn't been 7 years yet. This is a really great comment, Fran, and it makes me think that maybe we ought to have a webinar about this. I inherited QuickBooks and am still trying to master it. And trying to balance with bank statements, I have trouble because the bank lumps income amounts into the remits from National. When I get remits, I enter it into QuickBooks dues and donations by individual members. I do record the remit number, but somehow something gets lost in translation to and from the bank. Any suggestions to rectify? this may be more than we can go into now, Fran, but you've given me a great idea for an upcoming webinar on how to use QuickBooks.
Well, I use QuickBooks not for AGO, so but I do struggle sort of with the same thing because it's hard to get the syncing from the bank to always work correctly with QuickBooks. But the what I would suggest is to review the reports as closely as possible. I'm not sure how the remit, I mean, I see the remit reports for my chapter, but we have so few donations sometimes that I don't know, you know, how it is. But if you could get it, and I asked this to Elizabeth with the new IMIS system, maybe we could get a report where when we have those bank deposits, those ACH deposits, we have something a little bit more cleaner with the what the actual donations are, what the dues payments are, and split it out a little bit better. That's something to talk about another time, but I do feel that for sure with the QuickBooks product.
Absolutely. I hate the remit report that you guys are receiving. It's not detailed enough. It's confusing. Question from Colin Whitney Stevens. Does the treasurer have to send formal donation receipt letters to those who have donated to the chapter? I sure think you should. I know we do at the AGO. Joe is nodding. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we might want to ask the question of if their donations are submitted through on-card that gets passed through to the chapters. If headquarters is doing that, I don't know for a fact either way. But if you receive a check or cash or whatever, is not really cash, but a check that directly to the treasurer, that without going through headquarters, you absolutely are supposed to send a tax receipt for sure.
I receive through headquarters. I receive through on-card.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So
Okay.
then chapters wouldn't have to do another receipt for that. It would only be if you
National does not, I don't think National sends if it comes through on-card.
okay, then the
No,
chapter
they
would need to
don't.
do that. Okay.
I don't
No,
think
we
The
don't.
chapter would have to do that then.
Our system is so limited at the moment. This is a good question. Should the treasurer submit the IRS 990N that was received to AGOHQ when received and approved by the IRS? I don't think you have to do that. You just need to make sure to file it every year and keep track of it. That would be my answer. Okay, Pamela Swisher, do not worry. We will make sure that you get a recording of this Zoom meeting as the new treasurer. We will make sure we've got your back. Just going through this, John Tixon, who is on our national council as the counselor for finance. AGO treasurer here. Compare the results at the end of one quarter with the same quarter last year. Good point, John. Thank you so much for saying that. I want to go through this quickly because I know we have limited time. More questions about the 990. Is it another treasurer's responsibility in filing the annual IRS 990 form? I think that the outgoing treasurer should be the one that's filing it, gentlemen. What do you think?
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay. How should a treasurer handle dues and arrears? Does AGOHQ contact these members overdue in dues? When or should the treasurer take action first? Well, we actually, 2 newsletters ago, went through the entire process of your 3-month reminder to renew your dues. We appreciate the chapter reminding their members that their dues are coming up. And you can see this in the monthly reports that you pull, your membership reports. You can see who's coming up for renewal. You can see immediately that they're going to be expired the next month. And we do it on the 1st of every month. We do not have the grace period anymore. But yes, this is a responsibility of the chapter, even though we are emailing you 3 times and then we're sending you a final letter. So I know some people say, what's this letter? I never got any emails. We did send you emails and really want to remind you as much as possible. But I think if the chapter can take some responsibility, it would be greatly appreciated. Any update on when the new system will replace OnCard? I'm going to give a guesstimate of February or March. And as James Talmashauer said during our town hall a few weeks ago, we need to make sure that everything is aligned properly. We want to test this. We want to beta test it. We want to test it again. We're going to have a group of chapter leaders beta test this. I would like nothing more than when we transfer over to IMIS that we could put a big dartboard right up on our website and everybody could just, it said OnCard and everybody could just throw darts at it. But for the time being, please bear with us. You have questions about OnCard, just contact us. What chapter person gets the remit report? The treasurer does he not? And I think also the administrator, Mark.
The dean.
The dean. There you go. Okay.
Yeah, the treasurer has access to it in OnCard, but they do not get an email. So when I see a bank deposit come through from headquarters, I have to go search it out in OnCard. So that is quite another little problem with OnCard that hopefully the new one will fix. So everybody, at least the treasurer and the dean, gets an email when those remit hits.
Wouldn't that be nice? I agree with you. Fran Johnson, I want to get a credit card for the chapter. Can I do that with board approval? Would it affect our nonprofit status? Well, yeah, I think the board should approve getting a card. It doesn't affect your nonprofit status at all. It really doesn't. You just want to keep track of all of those expenses. And along those lines, I just want to take a minute to say that we've had so many problems this year with treasurers who have left maybe mid-year to take a job across the country. They haven't left information for how to access the chapter's bank accounts. I strongly urge that when the new officers are coming in, even if there's one new officer, both of you go to your bank and make sure that you have updated signatures on your bank card, so you aren't having to track down this treasurer like one of our chapters did. Tax receipts are not practical for events where we put out a basket for cash donations. Joe is saying no.
Yeah, you wouldn't need to do that for cash. It's just
Okay.
things with the paper trail.
Okay, more about Quicken. So this just confirms we need to do a webinar on that. And we will be doing recordings. I think that's about it. Wow, 27 questions. Amazing. Well, I want to thank you all so much. I want to thank our presenters, Jeff Kylan, Joe Galima, Mark Anderson, and Justin Smith. You all have done yeoman work during this webinar. And I'm not sure I have time. Let's see if I do have time to share our screen. I want to just show you where you can. You go under the chapters, you've got your chapter leadership toolkits here where we will be putting those sample spreadsheets. But then if you go down here, you've got your specialist teams. And you scroll down and you see descriptions of all of them: marketing, communications, technology, programming, education, certification, membership, chapter leadership, financial development. And here's where you can submit your name, your officer position, your chapter, and there's a drop-down menu. So it shows you where you need support, and there's a place, put your email and put your phone as well, just in case some emails do go into spam. We hate to hear that, but they do. And then just share a little bit about why what particularly you need to help with. So I want to just make sure that everybody saw that. Before I leave, we do have some upcoming webinars on October 2nd. I don't know how many of you have listened to Sarah Bareza's podcasts. She is just a wonderful, wonderful presenter, and she's going to be doing one on being yourself in the spotlight of public ministry on October 2nd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And then on Monday, October 16th, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Navigating Tomorrow, Young Organists' Expectations for AGO Chapters. And this is going to be presented by our AGO Young Organist Committee. And then on Monday, October 25th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, our very own J.W. Arnold, who is now writing a column in TAO about the weekend organist, is going to present a webinar about it. And it's going to include tips and tricks for part-time church musicians. And he's going to really lead a very lively discussion about music and resources and some easy things to do. So with that, I want to thank everyone for participating again tonight. Thank you all for the rich and in-depth questions and conversations we've had. This will go out, this recording will probably go out within the next 24 to 48 hours with a handout. And Pamela Swisher, I'll make sure that you get this recording. Thank you again, everybody. Take care, stay well, and we will be doing we will definitely be doing a QuickBooks webinar very soon. Thank you very much.